For those of you who haven't met us either at ICC or in any other way, Sepasoft is a system that connects aspects of the entire manufacturing process, and that spans all the way from ERP systems at the business end, all the way down through the ignition platform and down to the manufacturing equipment itself. So we talk to systems like ERP or PLM systems, send data up to business intelligence systems, which we'll talk a little bit about here in the next few slides. But also, we help turn data into information, and that information allows the manufacturing process to be more efficient, reduce the waste of the process, and just improve overall productivity in many different ways, and we'll talk about that. So we sit on top of the ignition platform, as Kent said, and it's very important to understand that gives you a lot of advantages. Single configuration, whether you're using the designer or you have configurability, and we'll talk a little bit about that in our low code, no code capabilities. It's all an HTML5 user interface, so everything is uniform, everything can be integrated together. We sit on top of any of the communications protocols that Ignition uses. OPC and MQTT are very popular ones. We leverage the report segment, and we build on top of the security modules that Ignition has, and we'll talk about that when we talk about e-signatures. So our place in the manufacturing ecosystem is between all of the business systems. We talked about ERP and PLM, but also business intelligence at the top. And this means that we have a connection using what we call Business Connector, and it's very similar in its functionality to what you'll see in batch recipes. So we take that information or push the information back up to the enterprise, and we use it to help run the equipment on the floor to translate what comes out of all of these business systems into usable information for manufacturing. So batch in particular, and I want to make sure that everyone understands that this is batch and procedure. So we'll talk about procedural manufacturing a little bit as well. There's a workflow manager, so that allows us, we call those recipes. That actually enables us to separate the recipe authors or the product experts from the engineers. So the engineers create these phases and the authors use them to build the recipes. It's low code. We'll walk through the user interface. Those of you who are familiar with SFC charts will feel very at home with this. It allows you to visually build your production procedures, whether you're a batch processing company or whether your manufacturing process is procedural in nature, both manual and automated. Tom, if you could walk us through some of the batch processing.
Yeah, be glad to. So while Jeff's making me the presenter here, we're not going to cover everything in batch and procedure today, but basically there's just too much to cover. So we're going to hit the highlights of some of our key features that we have in the module that we're added recently here. So Jeff was talking about separating the engineer from the recipe author. So if I was engineer right now, I could come in here and create what's known as phases in IS-88 speak, but just think of them as building blocks. So here I have a add ingredient 1. I'm going to go in and edit that. And we can expose that out, and I'll show that. It basically is going to show it, expose it into tags in the ignition system. And we have a whole bunch of parameters with that. So those parameters are associated with when we're adding ingredient 1. So we have a lot of, like, here's the command. That's if you're familiar with IS-88, there's a standard that if you're dealing with PLCs, you send a command down, start, it sends back a state, I'm running, I've completed, we send down a command says reset. You have that communication. So we see all that in here, and we see a lot of other things, just the date time of that we ended, the duration, all of that. But really what I want to show today is that we have a new data type here that allows us to take material in or material out. And actually, in addition, we could specify supplemental equipment. So if you had a punching press and you have dies you're using or that kind of thing, that's supplemental equipment. So if I look at this material in here, I have like, okay, what's the actual quantity that we used? And you're able to set that to go to an ignition, what type of ignition tag you want. I mean, it could just be a memory tag. It could be a reference, which we're doing. We're referencing another tag in the system, or the OPC communications. So reference tag might be if you're using MQTT or some other method that you're getting a value into a tag. So definitely the case of what we're demoing today. So you have a lot of settings here. I'm not going to go into all of these. If you'd like to get a demo of the batch system and all that type of information, please contact us and we will definitely be glad to give you a demo. So I have that material in here. You can have alternate groups. A lot of times you have materials, and while this one's not available, what's an alternate, the priority of those. We can create lots on the fly. Not all times you have receiving the material. You don't want to go through that step. You want to make it simple. So as soon as you consume it, we'll create the lot and it will show up in the trace graph. So whether you want to bypass your quantity, just a lot of information, where to get that, what equipment to get that material. If you have a silo, anything like that, you can specify that here. The lot number, you can auto select the lot number, you can specify a lot number. You might be a barcode scanner, may have been determined by ERP system. Lot status, so if you have quality checks and you have bad material and you need to rework it, you can set a status on that so it doesn't end up in your main production. Unit of measurement, whether you want to pre-allocate. Pre-allocate is really nothing more than just when we start this batch, we want to pre-allocate the material so no other batch or process in the plant can consume those materials. So we don't want to get partway through a batch and then find out we can't get the material because somebody else used it and we have a partial batch. So basically that's the type of information that we have in here with our material. Now a lot of them can be blank like you see, a lot of them we can fill in. So to do that, I would just add another type of, if I had ingredient 2 in or out, I'm going to do an out. Basically, I'm just selecting that type down here, and then the subparameters will show up for that. And you can have as many in or out as you want. So once you do that, I'm going to go over to the Ignition Designer here. Over in the tags, 2 different things happen. One, a UDT gets created automatically. So I had some of these set as reference, and they show up as a different tag type. But I can come in here and map these to my devices. So for every unit that I have, a mixer in this case, every one of those I have, the tags can map automatically. Again, that's getting into a lot of detail, and we just don't have time today to do that. The other thing that happens is the unit, in this case it's a mixer, these start exposing out here and the real values are available here. And we can view them here and they can be mapped to either OPC, MQTT, or reference tag. So that with that building block, and we'll look at how to use that building block, but these tags then are available, so now I can do graphics. I'm not sure there's a batch system around that has the graphics integrated in, so you can build your graphical screens or user screens integrated in with batch, all on the same system. You don't have to transfer tag values back and forth or some other means of getting data back and forth and all that extra effort. It's all right here. So if I come over to the properties here, I selected that pump. I can come up here and the state of that pump. I can select and bind that to a tag here. And then I can put the mapping. When it equals 2, the tag value, it means it's running. We're going to show the pump animated. And then otherwise, we're going to show it stopped. You could add other ones for fault and whatever else there. So I just wanted to briefly show how tightly it integrates in with the Ignition platform, all using the same designer. All right, now I'm going to go over into back over here, and we'll take a look at the recipe editor. So that's the building block, and that typically that's done by the engineer. But when you get over here, now we're shifting roles. Now I can be we call it recipe author, operations person, brewmaster, whatever the case might be. And so here's our basic, like Jeff mentioned, SFC. Technically it's PFC for batch, very, very similar. I'm not going to get into the differences today, but we can see I have a pre-weigh step here. So that's going to be a manual step where we're showing a document to the users, and I can come in and edit this document right in here. But that's going to be a user interface we display to the user and tell them how to terascale and weigh for a manual step. We're also reading a value from the scale. Then we're going to go down after that completes. We have this transition. So that's going to run until this transition becomes true. On the transitions, you can have expressions, and you can have and or, and order of operation and all that kind of stuff. You can refer to tags. You can run a script in here. All kinds of things to control that transition. Simply here, we're saying when we're complete with that, allow it to go down into the mixer. So then when we take a look at the mixer, we pre-allocate. So we're going to lock in those materials we want to consume. We're going to add some yellow. We're going to add some blue. We're going to come down and manually, we pre-weighed our sugar. We're going to tell the operator to now add that to the batch. And then when we're done, we're going to start agitating and heating at the same time. And then we're going to pump out and we'll be complete. So that's the flow of the recipe we're going to look at. And we can come in here, our add yellow. We saw that over in the phase, that building block. So here we see the same information, and we can further put some settings in here. We can link these to other parameters and all kinds of things there. So really what happens here is I have those building blocks for this. I can simply just drag those. If I wanted to add ingredient 3, I can drag that over here, link it up, and come in here and change some settings. And the recipe author is just dragging these building blocks or phases, setting some parameters of what they want. Now, I'm going to actually run this demo. So we're going to take a look at the execution screen here. Now, these execution orders, a lot of times they come from ERP, but they can come from manual here as well. And I'm going to put in a lot number, a base lot number here. And we'll call it A, so it shows up at the top of the list here. Okay, so these are just some of the batch parameters here. We have a complete bill of material. That bill of material, like I said, could come from ERP. When this is added, it could be automatically to the list or manually here. You can set all those settings. So very common that recipes are controlled on another system and are coming down into this, are added to this system. So I added that to the list here. I have a screen I built up over here already. So I'm going to go over there. We have the pre-weigh and the mix. I'm going to go to the mix. That's where we saw our graphic and such. I'm going to go ahead and select it. Start it. Okay, and this is just a view that tells us where we are in the recipe. So we can see we're up on the unit procedure for pre-weighing sugar, what steps we're on, all of that. So we can navigate and see where we're at. I'm going to go over to the pre-weigh screen, and there we see our instructions for doing the scale. So step one, I need to tare. So we have our scale here, and we're going to pre-weigh here. And then after we pre-weigh, we have our 3 storage tanks here with different ingredients. And then we have a mix tank. And probably hard to see, but we have pumps behind the tanks. They pump over. We have flow meters. We have an agitator that's going to mix it. We also have just an LED bar that lights up red when we're heating. So it's telling me right now to tare. So I'm going to go ahead and tare. Okay. And then I can see there that I have a target of 5 grams. See how close I get here. Yeah, a little heavy. Not that it matters too much for us right now. Okay, so I'll go with that, and then I'll hit the print button. Now you can have an automatic scale, but this is just one that is manual. So very common that things are done manually. Okay, so I go ahead and accept that. Now we can see we're done with our pre-weigh, we're down on our mix. And true to demos, our communications with the scale is not working. I'm going to go over to the batch monitor here, go into here. Because it did not pre-weigh, I'm going to bypass that step. So now we can see our yellow is pulling out of the storage tank. It's going and adding it to our mix tank. And we're doing 1 ingredient at a time, but if your recipes are to add multiple, it's just how you drag your blocks. So now we're adding some blue to that, and it's turning more and more green over there. Now we have our green product, classic green. Okay, so right now, I'm gonna go back. And we see we have a message showing up here on here. We can have the component and just show the message list. We chose to do it with an icon here. So when I click on that, it's telling me to add the sugar. So here we go, manual step. So we're mixing automatic and manual here. So I'm going to acknowledge that I added it. And then the automatic picks up again. It's agitating and it's heating. We see the red light back there. We also see the graphic on the screen is reflecting that. Agitator's animated. So again, this is all in the same system. We don't have a separate HMI SCADA system and a separate batch system. We also are consuming materials. We're seeing that as well. And it will do the pump out. And we see the pump animated there, just simply by binding to a tag. So while it's doing that, I'm going to go over to the trace graph. Here's our A lot that I told it to type in and use. And does a pre-weigh. Okay, so the trace graph would be like this. So we have our yellow ingredient, our blue ingredient, and then our pre-weigh going into the mixer and going over to final. And we can see what we have all the details here of everywhere we use that lot. We see a lot of information that is available there. So pretty powerful details, no code in order to get this. This was all done just by setting those parameters and dragging those blocks on the screen. If we go over and look at inventory, and we go to our finished goods tank, we would see our A lot up here. We produce 550 milliliters. Of that, we haven't consumed any. If I go over to our yellow ingredient, we see the different lots there, and even in freeway, and what was consumed and what was produced. So with that, I'll pass it back to Jeff here.
Oh, thank you, Tom. So as Tom mentioned, there's no code required to do any of this integration that he was showing. All of the components that were on the screen were pre-built by Sepasoft. The integrations to the ignition system already pre-exist. And the pre-application of materials is very straightforward. You can pre-allocate those or not, depending on your process or your requirements. And it's intended to keep you from starting a batch without having all of the materials available to you.
And the cool part about that too, Jeff, is that if those low-code approach doesn't hit all of your requirements, you're still on ignition. You can still go and you have a powerful scripting language, database, communications, and you can finish out that last whatever percentage.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Tom. All of the scripting engine is still there. All of this, what you see in the user interface has a back end to it, and the scripting functions and the methods on the objects all use the same back end as the user interface. So it's completely flexible. So the batch lots that Tom demonstrated, the material in and the material out types of components can be lots or serialized items. You saw the visual trace graph, a terrific way of identifying all of the places that a particular lot is used or created from. And then, of course, the genealogy and the reporting. So all of that functionality is built into the system as well.